Hello and welcome to my cellar once again. We'll get right to it. I really like hearing stories from the first years of the game and the hobby from you. It's interesting. At this moment I'm seeing old fantasy movies like The Thief of Baghdad from the 40s, Jason the Argonauts from 63, and many of the Sinbad movies. In my younger eyes, I'm 38, I can see Dungeons and Dragons ideas in most of them, like classes, magic items, monsters. Did you or any from the creative team take any inspiration from films like that were so much newer and contemporary at the time? Oh, yeah. I mean, those were our film inspirations as well, and for the daring do and the swordplay and that, the Errol Flynn movies, the Sir Walter Scott movies, they made a bunch of them. There was a guy that was just featured on TCM that did a bunch of those movies, and of course the Harryhausen. Anything Harryhausen did was a huge influence on us, and Gary and I talked about it many times. And you know, one of the greatest thing was throwing the dragon's teeth into the ground and the skeletons. Yeah, that's all over D&D, you betcha. Hi, Tim. Hope you're keeping well. I've had the pleasure of playing the Wheel of Blame twice and encourage everyone else to try it, but was wondering if you were open to playing a more mainstream mini-dungeon with a group as a one-shot. Unfortunately, we Canadians who enjoy your company can't get to the cons in the USA at this time. Stay safe. Sure. We can work something out and block some time. And yeah, I used to do one-shots at the cons all the time. I can dig something out that hasn't been run in 10 or 15 years, and we can have a real good time. So private message me, and yeah, I'm always open to trying something different. I adapted easily to 5e as it was just Arduin and Caltech's Warlock game with some modern mechanics and a new combat sequence. Great. Some gamers like hopping from system to system to system to system. Some gamers hop around a couple of times, find something they like, and they stay. It doesn't matter if you're having fun doing what you're doing. Fine. If you want to hop around and have fun doing something else too, who am I to stand in your way? After all, we're here to have fun. Okay, here we go. One more time about XP for gold. I heard a take on it that I like a lot, which is that you get the XP only after you spend the gold, specifically on things related to your class. So a fighter may put it towards his keep, commission new armor and weapons, etc. A magic user could also put it toward his tower or research new spells or create magic items. If they have enough gold to level up and have run out of ideas, they can discard the rest by putting it toward training, which should take significant game world time. The players may also describe brief adventures they've had in the interim, maybe as part of their training to deepen the game world and provide the DM with future adventure hooks. But spending 10,000 gold pieces on a hoard of potions of healing or any general adventuring items and leveling up that way would not be allowed. This means that an adventuring party will usually be very poor in liquid assets and will be motivated to adventure more. If they want to be rich, then the trade-off is that they will not progress in levels. Not meaning to be critical. Some of this is not the way I would do it. There's further discussion later about how you invest, and we can take it up there. If if the DM wants to get more story ideas or more possible hooks, or on the other hand, on the positive side or the more optimistic side, he wants the players to become more involved in the overall overarching mythos and storyline of the game than describing adventures that they had while they were training, or whatever. I don't. If your group wants to do that, fine. I think I can see where there'd be some fun to set aside a game session where you all just told tales of tall tales or whatever what you did while you were training. That could certainly be fun. As to whether or not you could finagle hooks out of that, that would be dependent upon how good you are as a DM and how forthcoming they are in their information, I would think. All right, next page. Here's a counterpoint. I prefer the idea of carousing for experience. You get experience for spending money on frivolous or otherwise not material useful expenses that your character would nonetheless enjoy, like like boozing it up in the tavern for many a debauched adventurer, or donating to a church for a more religious and temperate character. This would be in place of, rather than addition to, no double dipping, XP for just obtaining treasure. Well, when we were determining things like rolling into town to heal up, etc., and what they had on them, what they had to spend to heal, etc., etc., it was a common practice that they got taxed for room and board and and stuff like that. So you can make that money diminish. Again, if you have some adventurers come into town with a wad of money, inflation's going to take over right away, and that wad of money is going to disappear even faster. Interesting ways to look at it. It all depends on the depth and the verisimilitude that you strive for in your campaign. And in response to that one, yeah, I've heard that approach works well for games with more of a sword and sorcery theme. That would be the carousing, debauching, etc. And it would certainly not be out of character for Conan or Cull or any of those good old rousing tales where they only hinted at the debauchery and carousing. Or, open the chapter with a crushing headache. Okay. I'm only answering this for part of what's here and not part of it. Anyway. Just not disputing you and Gary spinning in his grave about so many classes, since obviously you knew the guy. But that begs the questions. And what were his feelings on the plethora of classes in AD&D? Every other Dragon magazine had a new one, it seemed. Dragon's Foot had a list, and it's pretty long. I know most were labeled as NPC classes, but let's be real, players saw them and took them as regular classes. I know I look forward to them when they came, my personal feelings being the Witch, Death Master, Bounty Hunter, Duelist, and Ninja. Everything but the Ninja I think is bogus, but that's me. When I was there doing the magazine, none of those, under my editorship, I believe the Ranger, the Thief, the Druid, and everything else was an NPC. And, okay, let's talk about NPCs. Gary really thought, and I shared his belief somewhat, that we were helping the DMs by giving them richer characters that they could play, not necessarily in in opposition to, but with the player characters. The DM, we didn't want the DM to have to sit behind the screen the whole time just announcing die rolls. We wanted the DM to be able to slip into the skins of these. Did people take them and run with them and make them into that? Yes. Did we figure that was likely to happen? Yes. After all, Gary said in every in the front of every book that nothing's written in stone. However, did we hope they wouldn't? Yes. Did everybody do it? No. So, when you're doing stuff like that, publishing in a magazine or a newsletter, which I did both of, you put them out there and say, look, DMs, this is to help you. Now, the responsibility for letting them into the game to become a player character is on those same DMs. And it seemed to us at the time, though we were eventually proved wrong, that the DMs wouldn't be quick to allow their characters to become these new NPC classes. They would hold them and reserve them for themselves. Didn't always happen. And everybody's got a different thought about it. There's only so many player character types, and the rest become redundant or so minutely different from something else that, I keep harping on them. The how many different crusaders do you need? How many crusades did they respond to? Okay, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of first edition simultaneous attacks was that who strikes first is decided first by weapon speed, and if that is the same, then by weapon length, with a longer weapon striking first. Weapon speed is a tiebreaker. However, I seem to recall, discussions we had on whether or not it ended up, that the larger the weapon, the slower the speed, because of the more mass involved in moving it. So a dagger and a sword that had the same numbers, etc., the dagger would be quicker. But hey, that might have been some way that we played it then, and it didn't come out that way in the end of the book. In the book, it might have been an argument or a discussion that we had about how it ought to be done. One of the many, many, many reasons I use a D10 for my combat. So many fewer chances of ties. And in my games, if a player and a monster tie, I always let the player have the first whack. And the way I do my melee, there's very little pairing off and staying paired off. It's much more of a general swirling whack, 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 whack as everybody swirls around the room. But anyway, that's the way I do it. Your mileage may differ. All right, what's next? Okay, now we're going to get into two-handed fighting. Historically, while two-weapon fighting was occasionally done, it was usually something done out of convenience or desperation. A shield or a two-handed weapon is a cumbersome thing to carry around in civilian life. So if you suddenly find yourself in a duel or brawl in the street, you could potentially benefit from using your dagger in your offhand. But no soldier ever went into battle expecting to fight like that when he could use a shield or a polearm. Likewise, in my games, I let PCs with above-average decks or special training fight with two weapons if they want, but the benefits are marginal, so most will wisely opt to use a more sensible weapon loadout unless circumstances prevent it. Okay, and there's some follow-ups here before I get into it. And yes, the cumbersomeness of the shield, etc., is valid. Next comment. I agree. Two-weapon fighting in the battlefield is a no, historically, but not cinematic-wise. And in the city, against 2 or 3 enemies, and in many duels, a rapier and a parrying dagger was frequent. In the Renaissance, a cutlass and a flintlock in the Age of Sail was common. Yes. In the next comment, in Renaissance Europe, techniques of two-weapon fighting, sword and main gauche dagger, were practiced by some people. Furthermore, in 17th century Japan, Miyamoto Musashi invented a style of fighting using a katana, the long samurai sword, and a wakizashi, the samurai short sword. Yes, he did. And Musashi absolutely revolutionized fighting. At first, many of the other samurai thought it was dirty fighting. The samurai fought with a sword versus a sword, or a polearm versus a naginata versus a naginata, not with 2 weapons. Musashi got so good at it, he killed so many people in duels. And then there was his 9 rings or 7 rings, or anyway. Yes, he did fight with 2 weapons, and he revolutionized it. Nobody else did. And it was a long time before anybody approached his two-handed skill, because he taught himself two-handed fighting while he was in exile wandering in the wilderness. But yes, it is a historical precedent. And then in another further comment, and yes, this individual acknowledges the second individual's point. My point is these techniques were largely relegated to civilian dueling contexts where carrying around large and cumbersome weapons or shields would not be convenient or socially acceptable. You can easily wear swords and daggers as personal sidearms and go about your business without being significantly inconvenienced or draw undue attention to yourself. And if a fight breaks out, there are certain advantages and potential disadvantages to using a second weapon in your offhand over keeping it empty. If you're preparing for war or to delve a dungeon where you expect combat, you're always better off bringing a shield or a two-handed weapon. All right, we got another comment, and I'm going to make an objection here. Two-handed weapon, underground, potential for not being able to wield it, not having sufficient space. All right, going on further. Why in war or dungeons would people be better off with a shield or two-handed weapon? I don't know enough about European Renaissance area fighting to know whether or not they used a weapon in each hand during warfare. However, what little I know of the era, two-handed pikes and muskets were common for foot soldiers at that time. Yes, but no gunpowder in my games. And if the game Medieval 2 Total War is accurate, that was also common for some foot soldiers to use a sword in one hand and a buckler shield in the other. Yes. And that buckler shield was absolutely an offensive as well as defensive weapon. Light, many times the edges were sharpened, and it made a second-hand weapon. But that was a specific fighting style. Mainly the buckler was for deflecting the other guy's blows, mainly. Okay, and as for cavalry in the English Civil War, they used, okay, well, that's English Civil War, and they're on horses, and I don't know too many DMs that have horseback combat. But hey, if you do, let me know how that works out. Pardon me. Okay, so let's talk about all that. Old Drizzle, the elf thing, the drow guy with his 2 swords. He's an extreme example. Yes, soldiers were not trained to fight with 2 weapons. They were trained when they were fighting as soldiers, using shields or bucklers and perhaps pole arms, perhaps swords. Perhaps they were lanzknechts and used their great swords. However, you can't use a great sword in a lot of places underground. So why a two-handed weapon would be a good idea to take is I'd have to have that explained to me, because clearance and all those kind of things you just can't use. There are many times when even a short sword is better than a standard long sword in cramped, crowded spaces, whatever. A two-handed weapon would be useless except to poke with. And even then, no leverage, it's not even a good pole arm. That's my take on it. And there were fighting styles, again, mostly used in civilian context, that involved using a small buckler. However, the Scots used them to great effect, and there were other nationalities and fighting men that used them to good effect. And they were, very much a secondary, but an offensive weapon. Secondary offensive weapon. Now, in one of those, something about a pole arm. Again, pole arms may or may not be of use depending upon the areas that you're exploring. Now, if everything you're exploring is an old abandoned castle above ground, certainly pole arms would be handy. But if you're going winding down into the lower depths, pole arms definitely can be a disadvantage. It's like the old 10-foot pole. 10-foot poles, you have to be really careful with them when you get down. You got to carry them flat like a fishing pole, or they get busted up. And then you have two 4-foot poles and a 2-foot piece that broke out of the middle. Okay, now we're going back to playing to the level of the players, or DMing to the level. Actually, Tim, and this is a statement that I'm going to take exception with and umbrage. Actually, Tim, most old school DMs argue that they know what level the players want their characters to be, and that is their justification for not allowing them to level up when the characters should have leveled up. They do this because DMs cannot handle DMing the game beyond level 8 in most cases. Bullshit. Nothing personal. I don't believe, number one, I don't like the generalization most old school DMs. Now, having said that, there is a prevalent thought among a lot of us that the best times are had until 8th, 9th, 10th level. And that's why we retired them in the old days, and that's why we still feel that way. And the fun is in the struggle. Getting there. Being crafty. Being lucky. Not being omnipotent and wielding firebolts and, whatever. Okay, once in a while you want to have an extravagant adventure where everybody's just potent as all hell and every fight that happens is like watching fireworks over the horizon. Okay. I believe that the majority, if not the majority, a great many DMs that have been DMing as long as I have, or DMing the games that I have, will agree that the fun is in the struggle. Get up around 12th level and now you're just putting scalps on your belt. I don't even have fun writing adventures for that. I can, and I have. And I've run games at cons that have what we would used to consider high-level characters. 7th, 8th, 9th level. Fully equipped and fully accoutered as you would expect someone of that level to be. There's lots of us. Ward, Menser, myself. I know we can. I'm sure Webb can do it. I'm sure. I'll think of his name in just a second. Also from of Swords and Wizardry fame. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I'm sure he could do it. There's lots of others that can probably do it. But the most fun is in the struggle. My opinion. But I think it's shared by a lot of long-time DMs. Okay, next comment. It's almost as though the game needs to split off in a slightly different rule set around that time. One that helps the characters interact with the game world on a broader, more political scope, so it's not just a game of the PCs killing bigger and bigger bags of hit points. Bingo. If you want to get into a larger world, then what I suggest is you keep these big level characters in your stable and you have other characters that you're going to build up and rediscover the fun of leveling up. And when it comes to leveling up, I have a very interesting comment coming up about just that. I don't believe, maybe some DMs can't DM beyond a certain level. Maybe they just don't want to because it isn't that much fun. Old school. This one has a slight ring of truth to it. Old school DMs don't even consider 8th level because the party will have gotten itself killed around 5th or 6th anyway. That's a trope that's only a little bit of an exaggeration, I believe. And the next comment was, I agree, but that is not a good thing. At that point, you're not playing in some adventure. The characters have become people who like to camp and sometimes fight goblins. And I agree. It does take something out of the game. Okay, next comment. All kidding aside, 1,000,000 experience points will produce a single 12th level fighter. That same 1,000,000 experience points produces 8 8th level fighters. The metrics in first edition are designed for low to mid-level play. As a player slogging through 200,000 plus XP to advance each level becomes sorry, not wearing my readers, loses its luster pretty quick. I don't think it's a question of DMs not wanting to go past 8th or being inexperienced to do a high-level game. I would argue that the consensus of the players is to do something different. Good argument. Good argument. And I like the point with the 1,000,000, and I'm trusting his math is correct. All right, I'm not a math guy. But the point is, and the lesson is, do it 8 times. You'll have a hell of a lot more fun. A hell of a lot more fun than you will getting that one guy to 12th level. Because racking up those points for each level is just, you got to just go kill tons and tons and tons of shit and do all kinds of amazing daring do and find astonishing treasures and holy cow. Okay. Most dungeon masters I knew growing up said past level 10 the game is hard to run, so they avoid it. You hear many DMs saying low level play is the best. Okay, valid, and that may be why some don't. And I do believe that a lot of us believe that low level play is the best. It's the most fun. the obstacles that we can throw in the players in their path are so much more fun as opposed to coldly lethal. All right. Now, your opinion on THAC0. Change the topic. Most importantly, is it better for the GM to know how to hit a foe rather than the player? Well, what I like about THAC0, and I've explained many times how it was a in-house design term that got out into the public. I like THAC0. And on my pre-gens, when I do Wheel and other games, I give them their THAC0. So, okay, if they've got a pretty high THAC0, they got a fairly good sense that they're not that strong. If they've got a decent THAC0, well, maybe they're a little tougher. They don't know exactly how tough what they fight is. Now, if they've memorized the rules and they can look at the THAC0, they got a pretty good idea of what's going on. But I like, okay, your THAC0, we'll say I give somebody a THAC0 of 15. And they roll a 9. Okay. They know that it's six better than 0. So it's 3 or 6, depending upon when you go up or down. Never did figure out why that happened. Now, by the same token, their THAC0 is 15, and they roll a 17 and don't hit. Whoa! Now this thing they've just encountered, because again, I don't like to throw General Mills standard issue monsters at the adventurers. So they aren't sure, oh, that's a so-and-so and it's got an armor class of this and I'll hit it on that. Well, you can think that if you want, and then you roll that 2 better than your THAC0 and still don't hit. Now you got a good idea that you're in deep shit because this thing's got magic armor. I like THAC0. I like the fact that it makes the players pay attention to what they're doing during the course of the adventure to figure out just exactly, how well they do things. How well they, and I don't like a game where somebody in the group goes, oh, some photographic memory guy, and goes, oh, that's a bandy waist, and rattles off the stats and all that. That drives me crazy. Okay, no, it's a bandy waist. No, it's got the potential to do this or that or whatever, but don't count on it to be exactly. It might be one that's a prime specimen of its race and tougher than the book says. And he may have been having a bad day or just getting over a bad cold, and he's actually got fewer points than you might expect. That's what I do with THAC0. I love how easy it is to mod OSR games. I've taken old school essentials as a base, and I'm formalizing a homebrew rule set cobbled together from tons of different sources. One of my mods is that I've eliminated Clerics completely and given Magic users access to divine magic. Now this one set off a little discussion. I never liked Clerics. I never liked the idea of gods being personally involved in any game world. So many of the old wizard characters I've enjoyed in movies and fiction were always a crossover of the stereotypical wizard and cleric or druid anyway. Shape-shifting and turn undead abilities are negotiable because I think they're all cool. Well, that's as good a reason as any to play it that way in your world because you like it. And if your players like it, you're good too. Okay, next one. It's not hard to think of a justification for the existence of divine magic without worrying about gods being personally involved in the world. Let's see if I can think of a few examples off the top of my head. All right, the gods don't personally do anything because they're resting and healing from an ancient battle, waiting until Ragnarok. Or all divine magic comes from malicious demons who sometimes do walk the mortal plane and maybe get their head chopped off by bold adventurers or rival demons. Or the gods are generally pricks who treat the mortal world as a gambling game, and it would be poor sportsmanship for them to interfere with a good bet. Okay. That sounds like the back. Any one of those could be the beginning of a good short story or even a novel. Oh, speaking of which, I'm going to take time out. Check out a book called The First Fable by K.R. Burgoyne. Really good fantasy story and very compelling read. I really enjoyed it. And Carrie's a good guy. Okay, back to this thing. Except that if I view divine magic as itself as the gods allowing their influence in the world, while on the other hand I see no... Okay, and this is a further comment. I see no reason why a character in the mode of a traditional wizard shouldn't be able to do most of the things reserved for clerics and druids through their spells, tweaked for flavor. The demon idea is interesting, and I did toy with the idea of transforming clerics into something like warlocks who make pacts with otherworldly beings. In the end, I said, screw it, and I'll see if anyone misses clerics. Quick story about what are clerics. Got a really nice lady, Doc. I saw her a year ago, and her kids are interested in D&D, etc. And so when I saw her the last time a year ago, I told her I'd bring her a painted figure because we'd been talking about it. So when I saw her a few weeks ago, we were all done with the appointment, the checkup and all that. I said, "You remember what I promised you last time?" "No, not really." And she goes, "Oh, wait a minute, it's starting." So anyway, long story short, I gave her a couple of the mouse guard figures, the cleric and the little one with the acorn shield, and explained to her how clerics are the healers in D&D, and so that I'd painted up a healer and the healer's guard for her. And so, in so doing, clarified that yes, what do the clerics do? They're the healers. Now, if you want to find other ways to provide healing, you got to look at this in a kind of a holistic way, because if you take healing out of the mix, you got serious problems. If you start to treat healing just potions like you're pounding Red Bulls, you've got other issues here. We'll see if they miss them in your world. Maybe you just make a lot of healing potions get found or something. I don't know. But to take them out of the game completely without allowing for the very vital role that they provide may be an ill-advised idea. Well, you can let me know. All right. All right, and then this is the last one. You know what? I might as well mention that I actually prefer. And this is again comment upon comment. A Xiangxin genre game in which heroes become more powerful through such means as cultivating ki and comprehending the Tao. Clerics are monks or priests in the style of the Eastern religions, Taoism, Buddhism. Shaolin style monks and ki are already official D&D content, so it's a small change. This way I don't need to think about gods wanting to be personally involved in the game, because no such things exist. There's nothing like Zeus or Jesus or Shiva in those religions. Okay. Again, the most important consideration in any of this is you're keeping your players happy. Not catering to them, but providing them a setting, a world, a continuity, an internal logic. Doesn't matter if the guy that lives 3 doors down for you who meets on Thursday night plays it one way, and you on Saturday night play it another way with 6 other different people. Doesn't matter if you run into each other at your friendly local game store. Hey, how's it going? How's your campaigns going? You might, just do what gamers do, compare notes, sad stories, how your character got dead, and you might recognize that you're both gamers. It doesn't matter if you play a little differently. By the same token, if you go play in somebody else's game, you're invited to play in somebody else's game, well then expect it's not going to be exactly like yours, and do a Harold Shea or something like that, and just consider that you've been teleported, transported, inserted into this world that looks a lot like yours and works pretty much like yours, but it's a little different. It's one way to deal with it. Again, we're just here having fun. On a sad note, can't remember if I must not have. Doug Ray, the founder of North Texas Role-Playing Game Convention, passed away a few days ago. And he was in such great, excruciating pain that we're all relieved that he isn't anymore. Great guy. I believe they're having something of a get-together this weekend. I know I'm doing some Zoom thing on Monday. I hope the con continues. I really do. And on that bummer note, I'll simply say, looking forward to going to Gamehole and I'm already in contact with Total Confusion, going out there in February, going to GaryCon in March. Can't wait to get back and face-to-face game, even though we are going to be wearing masks at least part of the time. I'm okay with that. And if everybody at my table sits down and says, hey, look, I got them, then we'll all take off the mask or not as we feel comfortable in doing, and we'll play games again. That's the important part. I'm going to be spending some time at the Independent Publishers booth at Gamehole Con. I've got a few very rare books or magazines I may be peddling, and I'll be there to sign stuff or just talk to people several times over the course of the weekend. And on that note, I will say Dodata Govi.
Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called in Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.